In this episode, we're going to talk about going to hell. Should be fun. Hell is, what we call hell is an idea that's pressed upon us via the Christian faith-based religious doctrines that I'm not too sure really where it came from, because we have inferences throughout the Bible of like a lake of fire and such, and this sort of thing. And I'm not sure if I don't, maybe I didn't study it closely enough, but I don't really recall there being a reference saying that, you're going to be sent to hell um, directly. But whatever the case, this idea exists. I'm not sure. If somebody knows exactly where that precise idea came from, you could tell me in the comments. I'd be happy to hear it. Um, Honestly, I don't really care. It's the idea itself that matters, and we're gonna discuss that here. This one, this the conducting of this particular avenue of the investigation is not going to be relying heavily on the values in play per se. Um, this is just going to be an inquiry into the very idea itself, and of course, we'll touch on the values, but they're pretty hefty. Pretty hefty values. They're big ones. They're not like they're not missable as far as I can tell. Anybody who doesn't get what I'm saying about this, you can talk to me about it. But honestly, I'm thinking this should be really obvious. Honestly, but then again, I don't know because people aren't fucking talking about it, are they? Anyways, I want to say before I go on with this that I spoke to this atheist dude online. I get in with the atheists a lot because I identify with the atheists. They're rejecting the Christian religion. They're rejecting the Bible. I'm hip to that. I'm all for it because if you're gonna have a faith-based ideology, you're gonna have a consideration of your spirituality, your religion. You're gonna make a religion, even if you're gonna make a cult. That's fine. But when it starts like imposing itself on everybody and destroying people, starting wars, getting people killed left and right, and then on top of it, giving the very concept of God and deity itself such a terribly fucking awful bad name that we have atheism springing up because of it. Obviously, atheism is going to have been a rejection of the God concept itself altogether. However, I would like an atheist, if anybody watches this, to tell me what personal troubles you have or inconsistencies you feel are present in any other spirituality, really, other than the Muslim faith or the Christian faith, the Catholicism. What older spiritualities do you have any serious issues with? And if you do, why? Because they're not really imposing themselves, and in fact, most of them are to be for the most part regarded as mythology and legend work. It's just stories that tell them, and they're clear in and of themselves that they are in fact parables, just telling an analogous story for the most part, except for the Hindu Rig Vedas, which does in fact present itself as an actual historical account. There are some other Eastern uh, philosophical methodologies. These are not religions per se, but they present in the same sort of a manner, but they're not imposing. They're not dictatorial. That's what I would have to uh, consider a religion to be, insofar as we consider it with modern religion, would have to be this dictatorial aspect of it, this imposition aspect. And I've spoken to our buddy Godless Cranium, especially via Twitter, and some of his friends about atheism being considered as a religion. I want to go ahead and try to explain to some extent what I mean by that here, just a little bit, because I kind of want to save that material for our interview and work on it there. But then I have other things I want to talk to him about. Apparently, word up on the street says Godless Cranium is a bit of a saint, and he's doing charity work, medical work, that sort of thing, volunteer work. Apparently, he's like the atheist version of me. So, kind of like to talk to him about that. So, you know, Phil, I don't know, heathen hour, he calls it. So, I suppose I only have an hour, but we'll see. So, I'll go over it a little bit here right now. Uh, Religion, as we know it, the values in play with religion are going to be the consideration of there being an item of worship, an object of inquiry or focus, an object of inference that is to be worshipped and revered, that is to be held in a dominant or omnipotent regard, even. Then there's going to be the building of a community around it based on similar beliefs, based on holding the same belief structures, the same value systems. There's going to be a tight knit community that sticks together, backs each other no matter what, and is just up each other's asses for the most part. Sorry, guys, but. And then three, there is going to be that cognitive dissonance in play, wherein the sticking to those guns, the sticking to those beliefs, regardless of what facts present themselves or what is presented. Period. And atheism has, for the most part, this faith based. Again, science is a faith based understanding, regardless of how. Regardless of how tried and tested it is, it's still a faith based consideration. I have faith that my atoms are going to hold together. It doesn't mean that they will. I have faith that I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning. It doesn't mean that I will. I have faith that someday I am going to escape the abusive relationship I'm in with Piper and stop getting hurt every day in both body and soul by this perverted abuser that I live with. Piper, if you ever watch this, don't hurt me for it. Anyways, they have a faith-based ideology, science, evolution, which evolution takes some huge leaps. Evolution is not proven absolutely. Evolution is a great theory. It works. We can see how it works. It's almost proven, but again, there are no absolute knowns. And evolution could very there's no telling whether or not evolution could very well be a fucking hoax made by God itself. It could be a prank. You never know. You just don't know. I'm not raising that as a viable consideration, but it's a potentiality. You never know. And life itself, I'm going to tell you this: when you hit bottom, when you get to the boundary, and you can stay there for a minute and then actually make it back here safely, you're going to see when you can see life from a four-dimensional perspective and understand how things actually operate. Life itself is much like a giant practical joke. It's a magic trick. So I mean, there's no telling. There could be all manner of ridiculousness transpiring right in front of our eyes that we're not even aware of. The whole thing could be a big fucking prank, and that's kind of what it looks like, honestly, from the perspective you'll glean from this course. But but they have this faith-based ideology based in evolution, which again, evolution requires creation. It requires an intervention event in order to work. So, I mean, not only do they have this ideology based solely in evolution and the understanding of evolution as it stands, disregarding God and maintaining that evolution is it by standard measure, it's random. I mean, it doesn't stand to reason. It doesn't make sense that any of this could be happening without some force in play, considering that it is in fact impossible if you cut down the line. And we're going to do that in this course. I'm going to show you why it's impossible for you to be watching this right now. But before we get to that, atheism has the absence of God, the no God, or the evolutionary principle of randomness, there being no intelligent designer in play. They worship that understanding, and in that shared belief they gather and they have a community building wherein they have almost a fanatical obsession with this, and they actually go out of their way on a daily basis to fight this, and good for them. Thank God they're here, pulling people out of Christianity, saving people from that darkness. Thank God they're here. Because what Christianity does is give you this imposing dictator version of God, and it makes people feel so put off and so disturbed, and it's sexist, it's racist, it's culturally biased. It's a very it's a very shortcoming obsessed kind of view on what God could be. And God is not human. It has very human considerations to what we're presuming God to be, that God is this vengeful, jealous character that, we've gone over this before. The presumption that Christianity gives us of what God is and how God thinks and feels is very human, very lowly, very shortcoming oriented. It's a bad visage, to be sure. At best, it's a really bad day. So I mean, it's just thank God that the atheists are out there saving people. What do they call it? Deconverting people. I'm all for it. I'm with them on that, absolutely. But where they go so far as to reject the concept of deity altogether, to even say that, well, we just don't consider God because there's no evidence for it, but there is. There's massive evidence for it. We have evidence everywhere throughout all history. People, every single fucking culture that has ever existed has an idea of there being a God in play, has the idea of there being an an extrasensory force, I suppose you could say. It's not supernatural, it is perfectly natural. Nature itself is what God is. That's it, bottom line. So to present that, maybe I didn't make it clear enough in the last clip, but that's where atheism stands, and they defend this belief. Their cognitive dissonance kicks into play, and they defend this belief structure that there can't be a God because they don't have physical evidence. They don't have like a letter from God saying, "Hey, I took off for a while." You know, you have people's personal experiences, and this is a personal thing. That's why people have this faith-based ideology about it, because you can't prove it to somebody else unless, of course, you can get them to see it themselves. And that's what we're doing with this. And anybody who takes this course seriously and gives it a shot is going to see that. You're going to find that you are a hell of a lot more than this, that you are, in fact, connected to everything, and that you have a hand in the play of everything, that you are, in fact, a hell of a force to be reckoned with, and you can do amazing things, especially if you cut down and start working with your body, your anatomy, getting those chakras cleared up, getting that impulse rolling. You're going to find out that there's a lot more to life than you were led to believe, especially if you live here in American society. You don't have a fucking clue what's going on for real. I promise you. Give it a shot, and you're going to see that evolution is correct. The standard by which atheists exist is brilliant. Thank God they're pulling people out of that cage. But there is there is intelligent design in play. This is just obviously evident. And for you to reject the concept of that just because you don't have, like, I mean, you have spiders that have warning markers on them because they're venomous, but you don't consider that to be evidence of of an intelligent design in play. It's like, if it doesn't back your consistent theorem, then it's kind of like it's rubbish. That's non-evidence. But it's evidence. People's experience is evidence. The stories we have running throughout history is very stark evidence to that effect. So for them to toss out their spirituality, and especially considering that I happen to know personally that it is true, that it is real, that there is something to be engaged, that the world is alive and it loves you and it misses you. Every one of you that's disconnected from it, it's longing for you to make that connection again. And Christianity is out there fucking vehemently destroying this connection, working to kill it. And the atheists, they're playing right in the hand there. They're falling right into that trap. And Christianity has them pulling the trigger on that final bullet to put God out of commission. I'm not going to let that happen, not on my fucking watch. God is a friend of mine. Sorry, but you don't get to fucking toss him in the trash. It. You don't get to toss it in the trash. So you got me saying him now with all this Christianity shit. Anyway, one of the atheists got on my case and started raising this cognitive dissonance issue, where I gave him a presentation. I said, well, here's the evidence that there might be a God, because, I mean, you might want to investigate if if people are telling you throughout all history that there is a God in play, then you might want to give it some thought and investigate it rather than just tossing it out because you don't have immediate proof in your hands. And he tells me that I'm being pseudo philosophical and trying to sound deep, when in fact all I said to him was that there's evidence for God and you should probably look into it instead of just giving up altogether. It's not very scientific of you, is it? These are the investigators that give up on the biggest mystery that's ever existed. They're going to give up on that because they can't solve it right away. I'm not. I didn't. I haven't. I'm here. And I'm here to speak on behalf of my friend, the living world, and tell you that, yeah, it's alive and you should give it some fucking respect. And stop being so high and mighty and gracious on your fucking high horses, thinking that you know everything. When your answer is no, there's nothing, and it's just random. That's not a very good answer. Honestly, it's terribly boring. It doesn't quite make a hell of a lot of sense, and it just ultimately it's never going to add up. You have to account for both sides of this argument. They are together. Creation and evolution are the same fucking thing. Evolution is intelligent design. Creationists and their ideas of God creating the earth in 6 days 2,000 years ago, that's ridiculous nonsense, obviously. But we're not talking about creationism. We're talking about just pure creation. Intelligent design is, in fact, a blatant, obvious reality. You are the intelligent designer. You are designing your life, yourself, your world as we speak. And you're intelligent. I hope. I mean, you're watching this. I hope you glean something from it. But most won't. Most will discard everything I say because they have that cognitive dissonance kicking into play. And what they'll say is they'll raise non-arguments, repeating the same shit. There's no evidence for God. Science has no evidence for God. Find some. We have evidence insofar as personal testimony is concerned. So, right there, straight out the gate, if you have more than 10 or 20 or 300,000 fucking witnesses telling you they've experienced this, you can't discard it. You can't toss it out of hand because you disagree with it. You only disagree with it because you're mad at the conceptualization of it you've been given from these young, ridiculously immature religions that have presented you this dictator bullshit version of what God is supposed to be. These are people. These are people coming up with bad ideas, period. That's all. But the ideas in and of themselves, these stories tell deeper stories, and that's what we're going to get into here. No matter how hard these men tried to create this conspiracy, trying to fucking steal our souls out of our whatever, trying to snag ourselves and harness our minds, shut us down for the most part, take over. No matter how hard they tried, no matter how hard they tried to design their fucking stories, they tell that they're for a spotter. We can see what's really there. We can see through the bullshit. We can see the fucking lies. We can see the truth in the lies. I'll show you that. It's present everywhere. There's not a bit of the Bible that wasn't written with a deeper aspect that tells the truth of what's really happening. The cognitive dissonance issue. That's what I wanted to raise. Ultimately, if you find yourself raising arguments that are only grounded in their own supposition without any valuable reasoning, without any valuable reason behind launching the argument other than for the sake of raising an argument, just for arguing for the sake of arguing, raising a non-argument that is only really grounded in its own supposition, like there is no evidence for it. Well, of course there is no evidence for it if you're not looking for it, if you haven't found some yet. If you disregard evidence that's present, then yes, you can say again and again there is no evidence for it, but I'm sorry, there actually is. So, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to give up on this investigation and trying to help other people see the reality of their situation because you're lazy. So anyway, if you find yourself raising arguments that are only grounded in themselves, in their own presentation, and you're doing it just for the sake of it, because And especially if you find yourself unable to comprehend statements made by other people because you think that they're disagreeing with your belief structure, that's cognitive dissonance. You need to be aware of that, be sharp enough, fast enough to cut through that and get to the reality. If somebody presents you a logical statement and you blow it off and say it's pseudo philosophical nonsense that's trying to sound deep because you don't like to hear it, that's your problem. You need to fix that. You are not comprehending the reality. The reality is going to be a balance between both. Neither side of this is correct. It's in the middle. And whatever human attributes are attributed to God as a character reference in some story, in some mythology, you can discard those outright. You know that it's not true because God is not human. God is everything. That's what the singularity. Keep that in mind. Singularity, eternality, onlyness. If it doesn't present like that, if it presents as though it has some human attribution, then it's not the truth. It's not the reality. That's how you conduct the investigation here. And we have to conduct the investigation via logic, rationality, and reason because we only have personal testimony to go by as it stands. And I am telling you personally that I know for a fact that it exists, that the world is alive. So you can either take my word for it and discover this for yourself and discover how you have a working relationship with your life and with the world and move up to that level of the game, or you can discard it for no good reason, just because you don't want to believe it. And who fuck knows why? Why would you not want to believe it? Why would you not want that to be the case? What has broken you so badly, pissed you off so much that you would discard the concept of God, even if it was the greatest thing, even if it was a good friend, even if it was here only to help you, and in fact was responsible for every move you make, everything that you do through this force, and you would discard that just because you've decided that you're atheist, and so God can't be because atheism. Fucking Bible thumpers. Because the Bible says so. Because Jesus. Then there's the atheist. Because no evidence. Because atheism. No, it's because experience. Just experience it. Just allow yourself to experience and come to your own conclusions. Fuck everybody else. Bottom line. Now, hell. We have this idea of hell. It's gone all over the place. I mean, the Greeks had their underworld and shit. And other people had underworlds. A lot of people had underworlds. And then we got this idea of hell, of course, came from that underworld conception and was stolen from that consideration. But we also have evidence pointing to the idea that perhaps there actually is an underworld, that there is underground catacombs, that perhaps there could even be people down there, and this is a possibility. I mean, we can't just disregard it completely. It's potentiality. It could be, and there's a lot of evidence to back that idea that perhaps there is some kind of an underworld. But hell, and being sent to hell for eternity, I seriously, as I said, I don't know where that idea came from, but I mean, there's references to something similar in the Bible that I recall, but I don't recall it ever actually saying something distinctly that. And again, you can correct me. I could be wrong, because I mean, ultimately, the point is that we're trying to argue for that case. That we're saying that yes, we're of the understanding that the soul gets sent to hell for eternity. Now, what we have to take into consideration here is the values in play. An underworld, and this underworld is considered to be below the heavens, not necessarily below the earth. From what I can tell, from what I know, the values that I have in play, it's not necessarily below the earth; it's below the heavens, and it's at the lowest most point. That's what we're good at getting at. Which gravity is the bottom. Wherever gravity pulls in, that's the bottom. Wherever a point of gravity is, that's the bottom of the well. So, yeah, that like a black hole is going to be the bottom, and black holes are fucking fascinating. I'm going to do a clip on black holes sometime, but we have an older ideology behind Christianity of reincarnation. And karma comes into play there. There's ideologies of karma in like Buddhism and Tibetan spiritualities and such. I think maybe Hinduism, Taoism kind of has that idea. But Far Eastern religions have this reincarnation idea. Now, me, I have experiences that I believe are past lives. I have memories that came back to me of being other people in other times. I mean, full life experiences. So I'm a proponent of that. I believe it's true because I feel as though I've experienced it. Of course, I can't prove that. I can't prove anything, not even to myself, and neither can you. So the point here is that we're working with a theology. We're positing a theory and we're seeing if it plays. Honestly, we are not discarding any evidences because it disagrees with what we decided to believe yesterday. We are experiencing it as it stands now, taking every evidence into account and making use of it as best we can to see what plays and how. We're developing a new technology. And we have this idea of reincarnation. We have this idea of the soul reincarnating over and over again. We have the point of gravity, which is the earth, where the earth is the bottom thereby. Where we live, the point of gravity is at the center of the earth, or thereabouts in the core, and we stand on that, and that's the bottom. That's beneath the heavens, obviously, and it is the bottom point. Now this earth is not a place for the faint of heart. Earth is not a place for the weak or the timid. Earth is a very terrifying place, filled with wars, famine, pestilence, filled with destruction, hatred, fucking all manner of diabolical senselessness. I mean, Earth is where Piper resides, for example. I mean, this did fucking. There are some sinister fucking monsters here on this place, and psychopathy is present and growing. And honestly, I think that psychopathy can be. I'm not even going to say that, but I think that discarding your spirituality can be a very dangerous thing. I'll say that much. I think that tossing out your idea of spirituality and connectedness between people could be a very dangerous move to make, a troublesome mistake. And so we're working towards fixing that problem right now. But we have this point that is the bottom. That's the earth. That's where we're stuck. We can't get off of it. We can't get anywhere else. And no matter how far we look, it seems as though it's empty space around us. We're trapped on this orb. And we have this idea of reincarnation, of continuing to reincarnate again and again and again throughout eternity. So one could posit that perhaps we are in hell and this is it. I mean, it's a pretty fucked up place to be. And if we don't get our shit together, it's going to get worse and worse. Now, what else? Eden. I wanted to recap Eden real quick because there are some things we didn't take into account there, like when we spoke to earlier optional theories about religion, like the aliens and such. There could be an idea that aliens had a Garden of Eden, so to speak, and that they created man and woman there, genetically modified some creature on Earth, a primate, and made. And obviously, as I've said, this stands to reason, as it would have to fill in the gaps in evolution. That would be a resounding success there. Were that the case, were we to accept that as even a hypothetical scenario, that would help to fill in the gaps with evolution and create less of a friction there. So that's a consideration to be made. Something stepped in and caused an intervention. Could have been some random something from the heavens fall fucking, but it could have been aliens genetically modifying people. And honestly, it kind of would have had to have been something like that, something to that effect. I don't see how any random thing could have caused this specific mutation to transpire. There's no causality for that stands to reason, that is not intelligent and directed. So, I mean, that's a theory we can work with. We don't have to hold it. It's not important. What's important for the course is the values in play, but these are considerations to be made for sure. Perhaps Eden was this alien place, and then we have the alien place. Perhaps Eden was, a manufactured area or something like that. And of course, to recap our designation there, Eden is to be considered, insofar as the investigation goes as it stands. Eden was it representative of ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. We don't know a damn thing. We don't have to care. We're not responsible for anything. Taking the knowledge of good and evil makes us like God in the sense that we have responsibility, and that we are now banished from the garden of bliss, which is ignorance. That we are set about in the real world with our own personal responsibility in play, and we have to take responsibility for the consequences of our actions. Be responsible in that regard, and thereby the serpent really was the good guy in that story, because the serpent did said you would be just like God if you ate this fruit, and we did, and so you know he wasn't lying. And again, the serpent is the source of wisdom. The serpent is representative of wisdom and knowledge. So there's that mechanic. But um, the alien thing we want to keep in mind, because we might have to work with that later. In fact, we'll probably be working with that later on. We're not going to take it too seriously, but we're going to play around with it because it makes sense of a lot of things. And what we want to do really is make sense of this, because as I was saying about the Hindu Rig Vedas, they consider that to be an actual historical account. It tells pretty much the same story, and honestly, I'm going to go ahead and say that it's likely true that at some point there was this war in heaven, that there was some invading force, that there was some dictator posing as God, presenting himself as a god, and we believed it, we bought it, and that it's very likely that that took place because we do have evidence of visitors from elsewhere. So, I mean, it's a consideration that we need to hold in somewhat of regard, some regard at least. Keep that in mind. It could be true, and it does make sense of everything. If we can manage to make sense of all of this, which we're going to throughout this course, then we've kind of succeeded in our investigation. Even if you don't want to believe it, if it makes sense, at least it makes sense, because as it stands, it doesn't make any sense at all. And we want it to. We don't want to throw it out altogether, because this is a part of our origin. It's a part of our history. It is a part of our spirituality. Even though it's a disgusting, despicable part of our spirituality, it is a part of it. It's a representation of us as a species. And so we do want to kind of try and clean it up and see if we can't fix the faults that it's causing in our own understanding as it stands. So I think that's about all I have to say for this video. I just that this one was like a brief example of just looking into things, and how we might discern things. The hell consideration, that maybe we already are in hell, we just don't know it. In what case, what's the point of us arguing at all anyways? But ultimately, I think it's going to be the point of this video, because again, there's some force speaking through me. I'm doing this for a reason. Some of you are going to get a message out of this. I think the message is likely the cognitive dissonance thing. You guys gotta snap too. A lot of you gotta need to wake up, pay attention, take things into account. If it's absolutely absurd, throw it out. If you know it's wrong, throw it out. But if you don't know, do something with it. Make use of it. Don't discard everything that's presented because it doesn't agree with what you've decided. Because ultimately, what you have decided does not stand to reason. What you have decided does not make perfect sense in and of itself. We're trying to get closer. Every idea that the atheists have at the moment is correct insofar as I can tell, but it doesn't get us to the bottom of the mystery. It doesn't solve the riddle. We have to have the rest of it in play, and that's where we're going with this. And of course, we're going to investigate it from a perspective of principal dynamics, put that into play, and give a lot of good examples as to how that plays out and how to work with it. But for the most part, that's what I had to say for this video. Thank you for watching. Kila Salai, Namaste.